children in the background.
Okay, we are live streaming, so if you are not speaking, if you could please keep your phone on mute.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining us again. I appreciate the diligence and dedication of our staff and our board members to give us your time to, review not only our normal agenda items, but those that may be relevant and are relevant to the pandemic. So lots of people working round the clock to make these things happen for us. And Anna and the team are invaluable, and Rachel, and we appreciate the attentiveness of our board members. So I will call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the minutes from the agency meeting of April 9th. Is there a motion?
Troy, a motion.
Thank you, Troy. Is there a second?
Tony seconds.
Tony, the second. All right. Any additional corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is the local labor monitoring report, which we reviewed at the last meeting. Is there anything else we need to talk about on that topic? The report was distributed at our last meeting. Okay, hearing none. Review the local labor exemption report. There were no exemptions in March. Any questions on that? Okay. Next item is the financial report, and Greg did review the financial update as of 3/31 with us at our last meeting as well. And we'll, I think, be discussing, I think most of you have received the 2020 budget, and we will be having a discussion around that as we work through the agenda. There are no project applications due to the coronavirus and no project modifications at this point. We do expect that activity to pick up, but we're good at this point in terms of approving the applications that were ready to be approved. The next item on the agenda is discussion items, and Anna has several items for us. One is on the new sales and use tax relief program, and then secondly, we will be talking about an extension of the Monroe County Emergency Small Business Support Program. I'll turn it over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Anne. Yes, so to begin, we are proposing that COMEDA introduce a COVID-19 sales tax relief program to grant sales and use tax exemptions of up to $100,000 to manufacturers, suppliers, and distributors of personal protective equipment, or PPE, for healthcare and hospital equipment, medical providers, first responders, home health aides, patients, and for residents' personal use, disinfectants, sterilizers, and sanitizer equipment, products and chemicals, as well as medicine and pharmaceutical products and over-the-counter drugs to be used in the treatment and prevention of COVID-19. In addition, we propose that applicants, the application fee of $350 be waived for any applicants. And we see one instance of that could be valuable. Many manufacturers in our community are retooling to start producing PPE and making facility adjustments to accommodate for that pivot. And so this program would be an attractive option for those businesses. One example is Hickey Freeman, for instance, is pivoting from manufacturing clothing to face masks. Excuse me, I'd like to make a correction. not waiving the application fee, but waiving the agency administration fee. And with that, I'd like to open it up for board discussion.
You might just talk about the administration fee and the amount of that. How does the math work on that?
Yes, so Rachel clarified that this morning when there was a question about the math. Just pulling that up now. The standard administrative fee is 1.5% of the total project costs for sales tax or mortgage tax benefits, and the standard administrative fee is 0.75% of the total project cost for a pilot, and the application fee is $350. So we're talking about waiving that 0.5% administrative fee for total project costs for sales and use tax exemption.
Okay, great. Any questions on that?
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Is there, it's Joe, is there, I read something from the state government and also something from the feds that if a company, so let's say they're gonna produce masks and the fair market for the mask is X amount of dollars. They're held so they can't price gouge. That's new, they're just starting to do that. Are we gonna do that?
We don't
Is there
possess,
anything?
we don't
Go ahead,
possess
sorry.
those regulatory capabilities. But certainly we would lean on state authorities to do so. Rachel, do you have any additional commentary about that? Or did I cover it?
No, you covered
Okay.
that accurately. Yes.
Of course, that's something we don't want to see happen, but it is
Right.
an activity that's being monitored by other entities.
Okay, thanks.
And another point I think is that this program is one of the intentions is to increase the volume of PPE in our supply chain, which would then mitigate any supplier or manufacturer's ability to price gouge if there's increased volume, just supply and demand.
Right, and we talked about that before, so I
Correct.
think that makes sense. I just didn't know if there was something in what we're gonna do that says, it must be sold at fair market value, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Are there other questions on this? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve waiving the agency fee, administration fee, and allow the application fee to be applied against the costs related to preparing the project agreement for the COVID-19 sales and use tax relief program. Is there a motion on that?
Yeah, I'll motion.
Thank you, Joe. Is there a second?
I'll second. Rhett?
All right. Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, Anna, the Emergency Small Business Support Program.
And I want to start by thanking the board for supporting adding $500,000 to the MCIDC loan program to support small businesses in light of COVID-19. We have received to date over 450 applications and have approved to date almost 100. So we are nearly exhausted. By the end of this week, we'll be fully committed to the $1 million that have been funneled through the emergency loan fund. And County Executive Adam Bello yesterday asked me to go back to our boards and seek additional support for the loan program such that we can potentially issue loans to approximately 200 businesses in our community that are struggling. And we got together as a team and looked at our proposed 2020 budget, the enacted budget, and identified over $500,000 worth of savings in programs that can potentially be cut, including sponsorships and various miscellaneous program costs and administrative costs. So we are requesting, per County Executive Bello, I am requesting Comida move an additional $500,000 into this loan program so that we can support more struggling small businesses in our community, because we're finding that we are having to say no to applicants who otherwise would qualify because of the exhaustion of existing funds. And this has been a very successful program. We are supporting businesses that by and large, and Lydia can speak to this, have approximately 15 employees or fewer, and otherwise might not be able to qualify for federal assistance. And as you may be aware, federal programs through the PPE and the emergency injury disaster loan programs, they're no longer taking applications at this time. So we wish to keep this open for a period of time. And we also intend to establish a deadline for receipt of applications if we're able to secure more funding. And with that,
And
I'd
so
like to
NCIDC is also contributing another 500,000?
we plan to make that request.
Mm-hmm.
We've also identified programmatic savings with the MCIDC budget.
Okay. Can you elaborate on the program savings, the expense savings that you feel that we could, consider freeing up or not spending in order to support this extra 500,000? I know we talked about doing some revenue projections too. Maybe we should start there. I think everybody has a copy of the 2020 budgeted cash flow report that was sent to us this morning. And we've already booked 364,000 for the first quarter in revenues, and expenses of 342,907 through March. I don't know if Anna, you want to turn it over to Greg at this point on whatever specific recommendations you're proposing and/or estimates on the income at this point.
Yes, absolutely. And you should see in your handouts that projected fee income at this time for 2020 is 1.1 million approximately. And Greg, I'd like to pass the microphone over to you for your commentary.
Okay, great. So let's start with, I would say the expense reductions that Anna had talked about that we identified in the budget that you see in front of you. As you know, that first big line, that contributions and sponsorships, a lot of that was for events and city events and county events that are just not going to happen. Jazz Fest and the Puerto Rican Fest and, all these different things that are just not going to happen. So we identified $250,000 from that sponsorship that's not going to be planned on being spent in 2020. In addition, there was another program, that was earmarked for another program that's not going to happen. So that's 250 plus that 50 is about 300,000. We figured out, down here there's a live streaming budget line item that we figured out a more economical workaround. So we are not going to spend that $20,000. In terms
I
of
wondered how we got to that number. Thanks.
the live streaming one.
Yeah, right.
So,
You know,
and we got to that number because our budget we had to do back in October when we first found out about the live streaming mandate. And that was just based on an initial quote that we had. And then in November, I had actually gone to a conference where someone literally walked us through how to do it the way we're doing it now with YouTube. And so we spent, significantly less money just purchasing a camera.
Perfect. I thought that seemed a little bit.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, so that there's 250 plus 50 plus 20.
right? We
And
have
there-
earmarked another under advertising and promotional of 125. There were certain things that we were looking to do in terms of potentially bringing on either a marketing company to help us with the websites and communications or a part-time person. We think at least half of that we're going to be able to we're not going to spend this year. So let's call that 62.5 in terms of that. And that's at a conservative, I would say, number. And then the 10 program, we had added a little bit more in there for the budget, but we're not committed to that. So there's an extra 25,000 that's budgeted that we don't believe that we're going to spend this year. And then ladders up the same thing was we have more budget than we have agreed to kind of spend with them. So that's about $100,000 add back that we think we can pick up this year. So if you go through those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different line items, it's a little over 500,000. It's about 507,500 to be exact. Okay, in terms of the expenses that we feel we're going to be able to manage expenses and not spend in the current fiscal year.
Thank you, Greg. On the contributions and sponsorships, so you would be cutting all of that? Or we would?
Yes.
And remind me, other than festivals, are there organizations that rely on us for their support that would be needing it even more this year than the given the
Now joining.
Jade, hopefully.
Hi, Jay.
Hi guys, sorry I'm late.
We're just walking through the 2020 budget cash flow and trying to free up $500,000 in funds to support an extension of the small business support program.
Okay.
Well, Ann, this is Troy. Getting back to your contributions and sponsorships, for example, wasn't like Jiva Theater Apprenticeship Program part of that?
Yes, it was. But I mean, there are other organizations that we have supported for many years other than just festivals. I know we don't do that much anymore, but I mean, some of those organizations may still be relying on us to meet their budget, spending. So what else? What do you have on your list, Greg?
Yeah, I'm looking through that right now to try to see the detail of what's in that bucket. Hang on 1 second. And Troy, like I'd have to go. And again, I know we are spending with Jiva currently. We have.
I think that was a long time ago, but.
This is Rachel. While Greg's looking at that, we're not at this time, to the extent funds have been committed contractually, we're not looking at backing away from those contracts and committed funds. These are funds that were budgeted for and are not committed at this time. That's accurate, right? Okay.
Yeah,
So-
and again, I don't have all the. I would just tell you that most of it. I can give you everyone a detailed list of what was in the buckets. The way the budget was and the way the financials are a little bit different, but I would generally tell you that what was spent last year in terms of like sponsorships, and I'll just give you a handful of, so probably 200,000 of it is, Rochester Community Robotics, the Rochester Museum and Science Center, the Jazz Fest, George Eastman, the Nitrate Project, Picture Festival, Junior Achievement, High Falls Film, Puerto Rican Festival, Fringe Festival, Center for Youth, Fashion Show. That's approximately 200,000 of the 250.
That's how much?
That's approximately 200,000 of that 250.
Greg, this is Troy again. What is our budget year? Is it fiscal? What is our budget year? Because I'm noticing that we're 2019 year-to-date actual January to August. The middle column.
So the reason you see it that way is because the budget's due in October, right? Robin, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And that's why when we're doing the budget in September, October, we're kind of looking at, okay, how does this line up to where we are current year to date, right? We don't have a full year in. That's why we kind of look at prior years, but our budget is a calendar year budget, right? At January through December. We use that January through August really just as kind of like a measurement tool, Troy, to figure out where we are current year to date when we're doing our budget, because we're doing it before year end ends.
It just seems a little. August we're already into the beginning of the second quarter of 2020, and we're looking at numbers that stopped in August on the actual.
The actual numbers were reported in our last meeting. So we had spent through 3/31 in program and community development only 52,500, right, Greg?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, Troy, to maybe this will make more sense. What you see in front of you is a report that was prepared last October. This is not a report that we just did and we're comparing January through August of last year. This is a report that is submitted to you guys, so you knew what was done last year. There hasn't been any updates or revisions to what you see in front of you in terms of, hey, we just wanted you to see what was budgeted last year, exactly how you would have seen it. Does that clarify it?
Yeah, it would have been a little bit more updated, could have been happening here on that middle column. I'm personally thinking that it's hard to really look at what was actual, being that, and we have those pressure numbers, which I didn't have time this morning to take this over and look at there.
Hey, Greg, this is Jay. Couple of questions. What's in the, and Anna, Robin, maybe you guys can help too. What's in that advertising and promotional expense line of 125,000?
Yes, I can start to address that, and then I can pivot to perhaps Robin for more color commentary. But it's my understanding that my predecessor wished to hire a full-time marketing professional to work on the team, and under this new administration and under my leadership, we identified that we don't have that requirement. There's already sufficient mechanisms in place with the county executives team, and that we have within our own set of toolbox, or our own toolbox, that we don't need to hire somebody to serve that function.
So
Robin,
would that,
did I miss anything with that? 125,000. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, was that the entire portion of it? So does that mean that 125,000 is available, or are there other things there? I guess that's what you were going to ask Robin, so I apologize for interrupting.
No, not that.
Greg was proposing cutting of the 125, 62,500.
Correct.
Is there more to be had there?
There may be, Jay. The only thing that we were planning on doing a website refresh. We're waiting for a quote on that. We don't think that's going to be anything substantial, but it's hard to, know exactly what that number is going to be right this second. But again, conservatively, we're saying 50% of it. We believe that we're not going to spend. Do we think we can make that 75%? I would generally tell you most likely. Like cut 75% of that 125.
And then, Greg, the other general question I would have is, we're looking at this year's budget. If I recall correctly, doesn't Comida have a relatively healthy balance sheet? Are we allowed to tap into the balance sheet at all to help for a portion of these funds?
Yeah, if you looked at the proposed budget, I mean, we proposed and was approved a deficit, right? And what you see in front of you is what was approved by the board back whenever it was approved in December, January. I don't remember what meeting it was. So we did expect to have a deficit of about $386,000 in 2020. And Rachel, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe there's any reasons that we can't, again, draw from our current cash reserves. And I would say as of today, that's approximately $8 million.
So we took the first 500,000 out of reserve. So to your point.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, would there be a reason or opposition to, obviously the first thing we should do is try and cut from the current budget and kind of redeploy resources given the current environment. But if we do fall short, is there reasons that you know of or opposition to dipping more into those reserves?
No, we wanted to initiate this conversation by communicating that we have an opportunity to cut sufficient funds from our existing budget, because the first tranche of $500,000 that we requested did come from our reserves, and we didn't want to just keep drilling that hole. We wanted to identify opportunities that, I mean, these are dollars that don't need to be spent this year.
Yeah.
How about the C&E, since no one's traveling?
Can you repeat that?
That's 23,000 budgeted.
The travel and entertainment.
Right, travel expenses are significantly reduced, although
I know we've had some already this year, right? So.
a bit, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Anna, if we took some of that and later found out that COVID was, we're in much better shape than we think, and travel is appropriate, we could always come back and refund that, right? Like refund that line item.
Yes, we could do that.
And I guess the other, just kind of looking at where the money is, I really like the Ladders Up program. Obviously that's been doing some great things. Are there parts of that haven't initiated that may not necessarily, kind of the worst part to be able to do is to put graduates into a market where there's no jobs. Mm-hmm. Is there something that we can defer there?
We had a conversation with MCC about this last week. The $100,000 that could potentially be cut was in addition to the $500,000 that we are committed to that program on an annual basis in the contract. So we plan to, with cooperation and participation from the board, we know that workforce development and training and retooling is going to be a key pillar of reimagining the economy post COVID-19, and MCC and this program are both real assets to that end in Monroe County. So we intend to keep it alive, but with new and different priorities and perhaps a new name post-COVID. So we're keeping that $500,000 commitment on the books annually through 2021. But this additional $100,000 was in addition, it was supplemental to that. And right now that program is effectively on pause and not incurring costs presently because MCC students are not there's that program just is effectively on pause, but not publicly on pause.
Right.
How much have we spent year to date on letters up through the first quarter? I don't have that information.
$0 year to
2020.
date for 2020.
So Anna, to that point, I mean, in the same vein as we talked about travel and entertainment, could we at least take some of that to fund what is an immediate need, and then whenever COVID-19 we start to emerge from it, we can go back and look at funding ladders up. I mean, because if this goes 6 or 9 months, that we might be into a new budget cycle.
Yes, we can absolutely move forward with that. That's a good idea.
So if we do all of that, does that get us close to the $500,000 if we add all of that stuff up?
Yes, it pushes us past the $500,000 mark. We just wanted to play it safe.
Yeah.
I do want to go back and talk about contributions and sponsorship because I understand the recommendation was to cut all of it, I believe, all of the $250,000. And some of those contracts or agreements with some of those organizations are, standing. In other words, they're being repeated. It's not like a festival that may not happen. I'm just wondering if that's too deep of a cut because you're taking all of the $250. It doesn't allow us any flexibility to help some of these organizations, in the balance of the year, and many of them are struggling, and they're used to getting our support.
So, Anne, with respect to this is Rachel. We will not walk away from annual contractual commitments. So we enter a contract for 2020, and we will not walk away from those contractual commitments. What we are suggesting we walk away from is $250,000 of historical support into the community that we're under no contractual obligation to provide, but it's just something that we have historically provided. Yes, there are organizations that have relied heavily upon our funding in the past, but the future unfortunately looks much different. And as Anna has discussed, we're just trying to identify the best ways to help our community.
So this is Joe. So I have a question. If we pull it out of the current budget, which I think is the wisest thing to do, and as the year progresses, we find that there were things that we thought weren't going to happen, and they are going to happen later in the year, and we want to support those things, can we then pull some money out of the balance sheet if we have to?
Yes, we can also look at our revenue. We can also look at our incoming revenue.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue to monitor revenue. And the situation is fluid, and we're responding now and then as things progress and the economy restarts and our support is called upon, we'll take a look at revenue. We'll take a look at all our resources available and kind of take it on a case-by-case basis.
The cuts that we're proposing today are really just for planning because the budget is the budget, right? So what we're doing today is identifying where we can spend less than we budgeted. But you're right, we should come back to staff and say if they want to make recommendations to they found some other savings potentially, or there was more revenues than they projected, it would be sort of an update on the spending relative to the original budget. But the budget is the budget. We're not proposing to change that. We're proposing to change our plan as to how we would spend the budget, right? So.
Right. And then let me add, I would add this, just in terms of the sponsorships, just, basically what Anna's saying is, hey, we're really looking at the budget here. What changes are gonna happen here with the budget that was approved? We spent last year $200,000 in sponsorships. Okay. Now we had budgeted another, I would say, unearmarked, if that's a good word for it, $50,000. Okay, so last year we only provided $200,000 of sponsorship. That other 50 wasn't generally earmarked for anything specific this year, so it was kind of like a little of an add-on in anticipation when the budget was done in October. So it's not like it's not like $250,000 went to organizations last year. It was really only 200, and anticipated another 50 for future sponsors in 2020. If that helps clarify it.
Yeah, that's helpful. Okay. So letters up, we would only be proposing to spend $100,000. The 10 programs, $25,000. Contributions. Last year we spent $200, so you could propose that, or the $250. In terms of planning purposes. The $20,000 live streaming expense and $62,500 from advertising. With the assumption that if we had to find the dollars, it was critical to the community, critical to some of these organizations that we're supporting, that we could again adjust our planning in terms of the money we're spending relative to the budget. But the goal is to still come in on budget. Is that correct, Anna?
Yes, Anne, that's correct.
Okay. Okay, anything else we want to say about that? Do we need to have a motion on the expenditures relative to budget?
Well,
Are
we're
we
not
saying that
changing
we're
the-
going to take the full 500,000 by reduced spending, or did we want to take some from reserve?
I would say to reallocate the funds out of the current budget. I wouldn't take the money out of the balance sheet now, and we'd have to reevaluate that as the year progresses and to see what, if any of these things that, in concept are going to cancel, may not, or may happen late in the year, and then we want to support those things. So that's what I would say. I would make a motion to reallocate funds in the current budget within the budget to do that.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Joe, seconded by Jay. Any additional comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, motion carries. All right, so let's see, are any other discussion items in our open session, Anna?
I would just like to add that County Executive Bello is talking about establishing a task force or council of sorts to discuss how do we reopen and revitalize the economy in Monroe County post-COVID-19. And I would appreciate any board input or insights to that end. the discussion right now is about establishing this task force and initiating some type of a study or contracting with a consulting group to make recommendations about how do we pivot. So I just wanted to put that on everyone's radar screen and keep you in the loop, and we'll be leaning on your expertise. And if you have any ideas, please send them along.
I understand the governor is forming a new, I don't know if it's a council to reopen New York, and Bob Duffy was announced this morning. I haven't seen the details. Is going to oversee the Finger Lakes region, which we're part of.
Yes.
So anyone know? Okay, you probably know more about that than I do.
Yeah, this is happening in tandem with that activity. So this is just a smaller, more local approach that would be informing the broader regional and statewide conversations. So I just wanted to share that as a piece of information very, very early on in discussions at this point.
So all of the board members, if they think of names of folks who might be very helpful from an economic development standpoint to the economic recovery standpoint, to send you suggest names.
Yes,
Okay,
that would be great.
Great. Terrific. Okay, are we ready to move into executive session? All right, I'll ask for a motion to enter into an executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters. Is there a motion?
Troy motion,
Is that Troy?
yes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. No, I won't say, is that Lisa? Okay. Any additional comments on that? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right.